All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer. And it is with the greatest of honor today that I have one of my favorite writers, political activists on the show today, John Rachel. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing superb.
Let me just tell you a little bit about John. This is his biography, although it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what he has really done and is doing to better the human race and hopefully save planet Earth. John Rachel has a BA in philosophy, has traveled extensively as a songwriter, music producer, neo-Marxist, right on, baby, and an evolutionary humanist. He has written 8 novels and 3 political nonfiction books. His most recent polemic is The Peace Dividend, the most controversial proposal in the history of the world. It is if you're mainstream Western. His political articles have appeared at Op-Ed News, Greenville Post, Nation of Change, Dissident Voice, Truth Dig, Russia Insider, and other alternative media outlets. Currently in development is a new novel set in Japan and another in Africa. Author Rachel has explored 34 countries since leaving America in August of 2006. He is now somewhat rooted in a small traditional farming village in Japan near Osaka, where he proudly tends his small but promising vegetable garden. And John has given me a ton of links that I will put in our article on China Rising Radio Sinoland. John, how did we meet? I know you reached out to me, and it has been years that we've been communicating together, but we've never really sat down and had a conversation like today.
Exactly. Well, that's true. And how did we meet? I think we got connected through Greenville Post. I mean, that's the obvious place.
Yeah, either that or maybe you read China Rising or something. It was right.
No, I read Backpacking. I love that book.
So you read 44 Days Backpacking.
Plug, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
You want to read a really good backpacking book, 44 Days Backpacking in China. I couldn't put that book down. It's amazing.
And you reached out to me, and I was flattered, and since then, so that would have been like 2013. So we have been communicating for 5 years, John. And we could fill a small book with our correspondence, emails, and stuff. It's just unbelievable.
And boy, would it be boring.
Well, I think we're kind of like spiritual blood brothers. We've helped each other out, and I think we've taught each other a lot. I know you've taught me a lot.
I have learned so much from you. And by the way, this is an aside, and I just want to say this. In view of what's happening with the purging of dissidents' sites and alternative voices by Facebook and Twitter, I just want to say that what you're doing is now exponentially more valuable. And it's always been a very, very great addition to the political conversation among us activists, but more than ever, what you're doing is valuable because otherwise people are not going to hear any new ideas. They're not going to get any new world views, and we're going to march even quicker into the abyss of totalitarianism. So what you're doing is wonderful. Thank you very much.
And thank you, John, because you also blog and write regularly. I have read, for the fans out there, I have read 3 of your books. I read Blinders Keepers, I read 11-11-11, and then I read An Unlikely Truth, which is actually a novel, and it's this, I think, sort of the start of your ambitions for the contract for an American renewal concept. And I'm telling you, people who are listening and watching this today, John's fiction. I mean, I put him as good as Tom Robbins. Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. That guy, he's that good. He's a very, very gifted writer, and I really recommend. I'll put all the links of his books and stuff here in this site. He's funny. He's just a witty, incredibly hilarious, great writer. And I just wish I had more time to read fiction. I just can't do it. And then I read your peace dividend. Now that one you sent me, I actually paid for the other three, but
thank you, Jeff.
but you
That's
did.
a rarity these days.
But then you sent me your peace dividend, which is a little booklet because you wanted my comments and a critique, I think it was, on Amazon, and it's a sort of Thomas Paine, slash, Patrick Henry, demand for a functioning representative democracy for the 99%. And I think you've even had a chance to share this, to pitch this to Dennis Kucinich, didn't you, the Ohio representative?
I've talked to a number of people about the Peace Dividend. I call it the Peace Dividend Project now, but it is encapsulated in that book, which you characterized very well. It is not a piece of deep scholarship. It is not theoretical at all. It's really a manual for pitching peace to the masses. That's what it's about. And that's what the Peace Dividend Project is, which I hope we get into a little bit more detail later in this conversation.
Well, I've read your Peace Dividend, and I know you have devoted your life to it. I mean, at least in the last, 2 or 3 years. I've even talked to you by email and stuff, and you said, I can't talk right now. I'm too busy working on the Peace Dividend and trying to promote it and trying to get it to catch on. Let's just you sent me some notes, and let me just read the first note and that I circled that really caught my eye, and let's just spin off of that. You said, for millions of U.S. citizens, life is already intolerable. For tens of millions of U.S. citizens, life is approaching intolerable. When, not if, but when, there's another catastrophic economic crash, the outrage will reach new highs. The pin is pulled. Once the lever is released, the grenade will go off. What were you trying to say there, John?
It's so subtle. It's been an interesting process to watch. I mean, the establishment, the power elite, 45 years ago set about completely disabling democracy, completely marginalizing the voice of the people, and enhancing, to the point of near totalitarian control, their grip on the economy, the politics, even the social aspects of American life. And they have done one hell of a job. I have to take my hat off to them because driven by greed and ruthlessness and so forth, they have done a phenomenal job at making life for most of us. It's interesting. It has been bearable up to a certain point, but now we're getting to the point where more and more people are falling into, poverty by government definition.
Yeah, absolutely. Tens of millions.
Americans are in debt up to their eyebrows. Their job security has been severely hampered, so that many people don't even know if they're going to have a job next week. Job opportunities are dwindling. Everything about the engine that kind of drives the American economy has been shifted into a form of corporate totalitarianism, which maximizes profit, disregards the needs and the desires of the people. And I just read the other day that there are several corporations now which have larger economies as a corporation than whole nations.
Yeah.
So this direction has made life, and I think it's kind of like it's a known secret. I mean, people know things are miserable, but they escape into the fantasy world of media, and a lot of people, for some reason, are able to overlook what's really going on. The 2008 crash, I think, was an alarm. It was a warning for what could happen. I think the next crash, because there's really no plan B, there's no way to bail the banks out next time. There's no way for the Federal Reserve to do what it did in the last one, which was, pour trillions and trillions of dollars into the coffers of multinational banks. There's no plan B. And so when the next crash comes, we're going to, if we're not hunting and gathering, we're going to be doing maybe one step above that. And it's going to be a really ugly, ugly mess. Now, whether that portends a revolution, as I know you and a lot of other people that I talk with on a regular basis would like to see a real revolution, that is deep, deep systemic change and a complete elimination of capital. Whether it will culminate in that is a big question. We look to history for lessons and so forth, and it looks like a lot of the conditions are there, but I'm not sure, given that we're in a whole new age, a digital age, and a whole new age of complete, absolute surveillance and so forth, whether a revolution would be possible or whether even the American public would understand that this is their only alternative at that point.
Well, what worries me is that, George Washington and other, founding fathers of the United States, they advocated bloody revolution. We need a bloody revolution every generation or two, to purge the system of all of the corruption and et cetera. But what worries me is that with the way that the United States is tilting towards fascism, and by any definition, it is a fascist country, albeit a very, very sophisticated and very I can't say it's closeted, but it is definitely sliding into fascism. What worries me is that if there is a revolution, it's going to slide into fascism instead of towards socialism, and it'll go towards the 1% and not the 99%. That's what worries me.
Well, I think that's a very valid worry, and that's why I don't advocate revolution. It may come to that. I accept that. It may be an inevitability, but only time will tell. The question is, what do we do in the meantime?
Yeah.
We're confronting some very, very serious crises. One of them is obviously climate change. The other is the steady march toward World War III. If people can't see that that's coming down the road, then they've got their head in the sand because, the intimidation of Russia on a daily basis. Last week alone, there were 19 spy planes right on the borders of Russia, just barely in international airspace. What are they doing? They're probing their air defense systems. They're obviously doing reconnaissance work to see where military assets are and so forth. This is scary stuff. If Russia had 19 flights on the Canadian border, or on the Mexican border,
or the Alaskan border, but the fact of the matter is we are marching toward World War III. There's no doubt in my mind about that. There are a lot of delusional people in the military establishment who think that World War III can be contained. Again, you look at history, and they think they can win it.
Or they can win it. And you look at history, and war never unfolds the way it's expected. And it never goes according to plan. So with, we still have 7,000 active nuclear missiles aimed at Russia and our other enemies. And likewise, they have probably superior armaments aimed at us. And the other thing is this ramped up intimidation of China. This all fits a plan. There's no mystery if you really look into the roots of this, the Project for the New American Century, the whole neocon worldview, the Brzezinski's impact on the shaping of foreign policy, past, present, and future. There's no mystery about where this is coming, but there is, and there's also no mystery about where it's going. So the question is, do we just sit around and wait for this to unfold organically? I just can't imagine that is a viable option. So getting back to the situation, what we have in America is an oligarchy. That's been established by some very credible university studies. The rich and powerful are in charge. the people have no voice. Most of the people in America are against war, and most of the people would like to see substantial cuts in the military budget. Poll after poll says just bears this out, and yet we cannot stop. We stopped one. We had some demonstrations, and I guess a lot of people phoned in 2013 and got Obama to refrain from bombing Syria. But we bombed them twice since, and there's this steady war going on there. So all of these attempts that we make at stopping the military insanity of the country comes to naught. That's the reality. And that is taking us into a crisis of apocalyptic proportions, in my view. So what do we do in the meantime? That's the question.
Hey, John, are you dropping or fiddling with something with your hand?
No.
God, there's like this knocking sound. It's really weird. Okay.
Okay. Hold on. Wait. I have a headphone set. Maybe it's bumping up against the microphone. How about now? Is that better?
Let me think. Well, we'll see what it stops, and then it was like you were flipping something in your hand, like a pencil or something. But okay.
No, not at all.
Right.
I have this headset, and maybe the cord was bumping against the microphone.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. And so, tell us a little bit. You said in your peace dividend and in your notes, just tell people, without revolution, what you're trying to do. And you talk about my approach is to flip the Godfather's rule, which is the Godfather's rule is make them an offer they can't refuse, and I say make establishment politicians an offer they can't accept. What do you mean by that?
Well, let's lay the groundwork here. If you're going to have dramatic and radical reform, you've got to have what I call regime change. When I say regime change, I'm not talking about drone bombing a foreign capital. I'm talking about regime change. I'm talking about regime change in Washington. I mean, a regime are the people that are conducting the business of government. It's the way of doing government. It's their protocols. It's their regulations. It's the whole way that they go about the business, and the way they go about the business of conducting our domestic and foreign affairs. And the regime that's now in power is in service to a tiny elite who are benefiting from, obviously very much benefiting from the way things are running. They make enormous amounts of money on war. Therefore, we have more war because, and it's that simple. So we really have two choices: we either bloody revolution or we have what I consider a massive electoral insurrection. Now, for this kind of dramatic change to take place, there are basically three conditions that have to be in place. You have to have sufficient numbers of people who are oppressed, abused, brutalized, exploited, which then issues non-negotiable demands for redressing whatever these injustices and cruelties are. And this has to be coupled with some set of conditions and mechanisms which are available for removing the oppressive regime from power. So if we're talking about stopping the wars, it means getting rid of everybody who's in elected office and probably half of the bureaucracy, because they're all infected with war lunacy. They're infected with whatever it is that is driving the exceptionalist view of America, the exceptionalist philosophy of American worldview, and driving these wars. So we have to remove them from office. Now, I honestly believe that two of the conditions are in place. That is, I think enough people are suffering, and enough people feel abused by the system. That, in fact, Trump ran on this. He said the system is rigged against you. The corporations are shipping your jobs overseas. The opportunities are only here for the rich and powerful. They're not there for you, the people. So he ran on that, and he got elected. The second thing that I think is in place is there actually is a mechanism for replacing everybody in power. What's lacking, in my opinion, is a coherent, it's the non-negotiable demands, a coherent, unified demand for the change that we're requiring, which focuses the energy of the public, and this is both the positive and the negative energy, and then builds that demand to critical mass, and then throws these people out of office. And how do they do it? We do it, believe it or not, by voting. Even though the system of voting has been very, very compromised, the numbers show that there is a vast, vast pool of people available that could completely turn things around. They can only disenfranchise so many people, and they can only rig so many voting machines. Mm-hmm. So let me run some numbers by you. There are 235 million eligible voters in the United States. 235 million. Mm-hmm. As you know, even in the best elections, which are typically presidential elections, we only get like 135, 140 million people. So you get 100 million people who are not participating in the system who are technically eligible to vote. So half of those, just statistically, are in the bottom half of the economy. We have about 328 million people, so there's about 164 million people, if you just put a median line there, who are the bottom half of the economy. And so if you take that same formula, there are about 117 million people who are eligible to vote, who are in the bottom of the economy. And I'd say that disproportionately, these are the people that are not participating. Well, why don't they participate? Well, they're too busy, they're jaded, they're disenchanted, they don't believe that the system works for them. And that's been true. But part of the reasons it's been true is because there's never, ever a focused, unifying message delivered to the people that galvanizes them and allows them, that renovates their belief that their vote actually counts. So I spent 2 years trying to figure out what kind of message that would be. What is it that would get people to pay attention and actually get in their car on election day and vote? And I was on a bicycle ride one day, and interesting, you did key in on and like the truth. That was a very early iteration of my whole contract strategy. But it was after that I also wrote a book called Candidate Contracts: Taking Back the Democracy, and one called Fighting for the Democracy We Deserve, which is all built around these numbers and so forth. But again, looking for those galvanizing messages, those things that people care about. And I was riding my bicycle through the rice fields here one day, and it hit me. It hit me. It's staring us right in the face. It's staring us right in the face. And it's peace. 70% of the people want the wars ended. 72% of the people want us out of Afghanistan. I mean, there are huge percentages of people that are for peace. But the problem is, there's no way that desire, there's no vehicle given them to express that desire as what I call the ultimate ultimatum. And that's where the peace dividend came up. Peace groups typically appeal to on a very high moral plane. They appeal to people's empathy. They appeal to people's concern for human life. They're people's natural abhorrence of human suffering. They appeal to those things. But the problem is that these people that I'm talking about, the 164 million on the bottom of the economy, they care. They care about human suffering, and they care about misery, and they care about people being exploited, but they care about their own people. They care about their kids making it to school safely. They care about their own misery. They don't care about, I mean, you can say, oh, they're so insensitive. They're not insensitive. They're just preoccupied with their own survival and what they should be, which is their own community, their own family, the people around them. They don't, they hear about cholera epidemic in Yemen. They don't know where the hell Yemen is. They may not even know what cholera is, or am I saying cholera, whatever. the point is they do care, and they care passionately, but they are never given the opportunity to express that caring in the voting booth. So I said, you know what? When I look at what's happened the last 26 years, what I see is a gigantic fraud that's been perpetrated on, this is what hit me on the bicycle, a gigantic fraud that's been perpetrated on the people of America. Starting in 1992, we were promised, and this is where I came up with the whole peace dividend concept. We were promised a peace dividend. The Soviet Union had just collapsed. There was all this optimism. We had won the Cold War. Now we were going to take all this money and all of our ingenuity and our energy and our creativity and turn it inwards and create a better life for Americans.
Which is what Trump is saying.
Well, he is. Yeah, he is saying that. While he ups the military budget by $70 billion. Yeah. But the point is, what I said was this: what happened was the military budgets went up. We ramped up the wars. We expanded the military. We built hundreds and hundreds of bases across. Wait a minute. What happened to this peace dividend we were promised? So I started doing some research, and I started adding up. I took what the defense budget was in 1992, which was about $300 billion, and I froze it there. They promised they were going to lower it, but I just froze it there. And then I took and I compared the defense budgets every year afterwards. And that, interestingly enough, about 8 years in a row, it did go down a little bit. But the other 18 years, it went up. And now it's like $420 billion over that $300 billion line that I drew. So I added this up. And then I added up all the wars. I added up the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. Completely fraudulent wars. And I said, you know, this represents the most colossal ripoff of taxpayer dollars in the history of the world. And I added up, and by the way, the figure does have to be updated because the book was published in 2016. But it's over $5 trillion, and this is very conservative. Very conservative.
It's very conservative, John.
Because what I wanted to do is I wanted this proposal to be unassailable. So I took the government's own conservative figures, and even so, it adds up to $5 trillion, which amazingly adds up to over $15,000 per citizen for all 328 million citizens in the country. And I said, okay, they conned us, they lied to us, they ripped us off, they stole our money, they misused it. They have now created situations in the world where we are far worse off than we ever imagined we would be. We demand our money back. And that's the peace dividend. Now, this sounds naive, but I want you to think about some of the things that Donald Trump ran on, and even some of the things Bernie Sanders. Yeah. People are so ripe for this message. They know they've been conned. They know they've been lied to. They know they've been ripped off. But this is why I call it the most controversial proposal in the history of the world, because what I'm asking is the United States of America to pay war reparations to its own citizens. Because, yes, because they have the United States of America under this neocon fraud that has been perpetrated has conducted a war on our communities, a war on our educational system, a war on our cities, a war on our families, and a war on the truth. And therefore, we want our money back. People say this is pie in the sky, but I think this would be one of the easiest sells in the world. And I've had this run by some people. And I had a guy in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He said, "Goddamn right. You give me a politician that will get behind this, and he's got my vote. I don't care what he stands for other than that." I think if we were to go out and sell this, in other words, war is bad. We want our money back. End the war in Yemen. We want our money back. We want our money back should be the battle cry for the next congressional election. And that's the whole peace dividend project. I think, I have no way of predicting. I mean, who knows? Who knew that 99% versus 1% would become the most famous meme in the last 30 years? But the truth is, I think this has a lot of gut level appeal. And I think that if you started, if peace groups in particular were to start to append this to their message, they would stop singing their message to the choir, which is, by the way, a shrinking choir. And some of the regular people would start paying attention. They'd start thinking, yeah, this is absolutely correct. We have been ripped off. And this was our money. This is our country. This supposedly is our government, by the people, of the people, for the people. Why shouldn't we get a refund? Now, maybe I'm being optimistic, but if we were to get into the details of what would happen after that, it would have enormous, enormous impact on the way that government does business and the way that we write our budgets and everything. So anyway, that's the whole peace dividend concept in a nutshell.
The another one of your comments, you said the irresponsible, criminal, fraudulent abuse that is heaped on the American people with endless wars, monomaniacal delusions of being Darth Vader, ruling the planet with an iron fist, the militarization of everything, our communities, our family life, our sporting events, our entertainment, constitutes the biggest lie ever told in history. Thus it presents us with an historic opportunity. If we don't seize it, we have ourselves to blame, and history will judge us as cowardly fools.
I quote a guy named David Swanson, who wrote a book called War is a Lie. And I love what he has to say, but he never takes it to that next stage. Everything I watched this recent conference in Toronto, I watched the videos, and they're talking about divestment. Well, divestment's a wonderful thing. Do you think the Uber driver in Chattanooga, Tennessee has a lot of his stocks in Raytheon and Lockheed? Right? He doesn't give a shit about divestment. Yeah. But you say to him, you know what? You have been taken. How big is your family? Well, I got 2 kids and a wife. Well, okay. You've been ripped off for $60,000, and we're going to get that money back. It'll be payable to you over the 3 years. You don't think he's going to pay attention? Yeah. Don't think he's going to at least start listening? And this is the problem I see with the peace dividend. I did talk to Dennis Kucinich, and Dennis Kucinich seems as lost as everybody. Is they talk in all these abstractions, and they predominantly preach a moral, humanistic argument against war. David Swanson has a legalistic argument because of the what's it called, Briggs-Stratton Agreement back in 1923 or something that outlawed war. But you know what? Nobody pays any attention to that, and nobody really pays much attention to the moral arguments anymore. In fact, I would argue that the anti-war movement of Vietnam was not a moral argument. Those guys were just trying to save their asses. They didn't want to go get their asses blown off in some country in Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah, that's back when there was conscription, and even rich people had the rich kids had to actually make an effort not to have to go, like join the Texas Air Reserve Guard, like George W. Bush, etc. So yeah, exactly. I see what you're saying.
So people always point to that, and a lot of the peace activism now is modeled on what went on back in the 60s and 70s. But everything has changed since then. Digital technology, media, the consolidation of the main deliverers of media in America, everything has changed. So, you have a peace demonstration now, and 45 people show up in front of the White House, and they wave their signs. And for some reason, the peace movement doesn't look at that and say, gee, this is kind of disappointing. They go, oh, there were only 42 last month, so we got 3 more this time. This is great. Well, I remember the last peace march that I participated in was in 2003 in Portland, Oregon. There were 58,000 people in Portland, Oregon on the streets protesting that war. But we should learn a lesson from that. It didn't stop the war. Yeah. And none of the protests that are going on right now are stopping the wars, and the petitions aren't stopping the wars. And even the divestment is marginal. It's not,
it's minuscule. It's insignificant.
So what do we do? My argument for trying the peace dividend is simple. Everything that we're doing right now is not working. I don't know. I'm not Nostradamus. I can't tell you for sure that the peace dividend will work. But I know this. It's a hell of a lot better than what we're doing now, because what we're doing now is completely failing. In fact, the peace movement is going backwards. If you look at what has happened to the United States of America in the last 10 years, it's gone backwards. So it's time for something fresh and innovative. And something more importantly in my mind is talking to regular people, talking to the common man in the street and respecting their values. Don't condemn a man because he doesn't know the capital of Libya. Don't condemn him for that. Praise him for wanting to have a better life for his children, for his wife, for his neighbors, for his community. That's where his priorities are. That's what he's working towards. And if you could if you could inject that kind of refund, I'm talking about $5 trillion over 3 years, into the economy, it would be into the consumer economy, because everybody would get exactly the same. I'm sure that Warren Buffett would not jump up and down on the table when he heard he was going to get a $15,000 bonus. But the Uber driver would, and so would the clerk working at Walmart for 30 hours a week. They would be very happy about getting that kind of money injected into, and the justification for it is not so far-fetched. This is money that was taken that should have been as taxpayer money, and some of it borrowed, which also ends up being taxpayer money because our children and our children's children are going to be paying back that debt, taken from the people. This is money that should have been injected in the schools. It should have been put in the communities. It should have fixed the roads and the bridges. Mm-hmm. It should have been put into greening the economy the way that China is doing. Mm-hmm. It should be put into investing in things that have long-range impact on the well-being of all the citizens. And it was taken from them and squandered in these wars. So therefore, it's not so absurd to say we demand this. We need the money back so I can put some tires on my car and I can put some clothes on my kids. And then after 3 years, it had this kind of refund, which so dramatically changed the budgeting of money. And let me get to the most important point, which is the Godfather role. It would completely change things. And after the refund was paid for 3 years, we would have an abundance of money available to do some of the things that we need to do. Mm-hmm. Because we wouldn't be paying this refund out any longer. We would now have that $1.89 trillion available to us to put into other things. But let's get to the Godfather role. All right, here's the idea. The Godfather, and this is how I think this could work. Let's just very optimistically assume that we have 100 million people behind this. And they're saying, yes, we deserve to get a refund for this. We demand that we get a refund. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to call up Ted Cruz and even Elizabeth Warren. They're not going to go for this. And so the Godfather rule is make them an offer they can't refuse. My Godfather rule is make them an offer they can't accept. And what that means is you go to your establishment politicians and you say, this is non-negotiable. We want our peace dividend, and we want it in writing, that this is going to, from the election of the next Congress, that there's going to be bills put on the floor that will put this into effect. And we're not taking no for an answer. What are they going to do? They're not going to go along with it. They're going to be making excuses. Oh, this will bankrupt the economy. We can't do this, on and on. So they will turn it around. We make them an offer they can't accept. And then we elect people who are enlightened enough to realize that war is not the answer, and that the only way that we will have anything resembling a future and anything resembling democracy, we elect the people that do back with a written guarantee to enact the peace dividend refund. So that's what that psychology is. In other words, you give the establishment the ultimate ultimatum. This is it. We will put you back into office, but only if you back this initiative. And when they turn it down, then it opens the floodgates for independent candidates, third-party candidates, and true progressives, not the Bernie Sanders who talk a good domestic line, but promote war and promote apartheid in Palestine and so forth. The peace dividend candidates sign a contract, and they're going to be people that are completely on the outside of the establishment. They will get no money from corporation banks and no support from the established parties, because something like the peace dividend is anathema to these people.
Mm-hmm. Well, sir, I would love for it to work. The corruption, one of the, and to kind of wrap this up, another one of the things that you wrote is the rich and the powerful now have their puppets in office doing their every bidding. When an election rolls around, we give those puppets an offer they can't accept, then we vote them out of office. It won't be easy. It'll be an epic battle. But to save the country and the human race from the lunatics now running the show, it's got to be done. No compromise, no equivocation, no excuses, no fear. And I would love for it to work. I just the system is so freaking corrupt, and it is just so corrupted by money, and they own the media. And my biggest concern is that people are just freaking brainwashed. I mean, they're brainwashed, and I agree with you. They're sincere. They don't want war, etc. But the problem is the media has got them so absolutely brainwashed.
But I would say this to you: how did they get brainwashed?
Well, they got brainwashed by a government managed, I don't want to say controlled, but definitely government managed, and.
But what is the mechanism?
Media.
What is the mechanism?
The
mechanism is to take something and just repeat it over and over and over. So
the big lie.
The big lie. They just repeat it over and over and over. So it astonishes me that the progressive movement hasn't figured this out. What you need to do is you need to find a good unifying message and just repeat it over. That's the only way you can fight this. I'm serious. I'm serious.
That's a good comeback.
We had a very very promising and hopeful thing in OWS. That meme, the 1% versus the 99%. I don't know who came up with it, but it was repeated, and it's still being repeated years and years later, over and over and over. And there's no public relations company behind it, and the government certainly isn't behind it, and Wall Street isn't behind it, but it gets repeated over and over and over. So why not? Wars are lies. We want our money back. That should be on the lips of everybody.
Yeah.
In the peace movement right now, or something like it. It doesn't have to be the peace, but it's got to be one message, and it's got to be in direct opposition to the lie that they're telling. So you beat people. They beat us up with lies. We beat people up with the truth. But don't deviate. Just stay on it. And you know what? You don't have to have a Wolf Blitzer talking about it, because people will talk about it. They'll talk about it in the bars. They'll talk about it in the restaurants. They'll lean over the fence. People will talk about it if you come up with that one thing. But it seems to what the progressive movement, and especially the peace movement, seems very adept at, is coming up with abstruse, completely enigmatic, weird, inaccessible messages that nobody understands or pays attention to. So I'm just one guy. I'm just trying to come up with that message. That's all I'm trying to do. If somebody has a better idea, please email me. If it's better, I will latch on to it in a heartbeat. Yeah. But I'm trying to find that one thing because I don't see it out there. I see nothing. End the war in Yemen. What the hell kind of message is that? It's a good message, but nobody knows what it means.
Nobody even knows where Yemen is.
Exactly. That's my point. So I'm just trying, and I'm thinking, it's a bit crude, but if you appeal to the financial interests of the everyday guy, if nothing else, he's going to at least pay attention and hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
You say to him, look, you got a family of 5? All right. Yeah, we can manage that. What's 5 times 15? That's $75,000. Okay, you'll get $25,000 a year for the next 3 years for your family if we get this through. That's all I have to say. Well, you don't think he's going to pay attention? $25,000 to a guy who's only making $30,000 a year? So this is my point. This is, to me, is an attention grabber, but it's not deceptive because it is based really, it's based in truth. This has been a colossal ripoff. And I don't see why people aren't more angry about it.
Well, yeah, I know. I don't either, other than the fact that they're too busy consuming and buying and too busy being, I hate to sound so, revolutionary, but they're just being too bourgeois and too wrapped up in consumption and material satisfaction.
But you're making my point. I'm talking about handing them $25,000 for paying attention to peace. Yeah. And they can go buy even more stuff. They can buy more motorcycles and other ways to destroy the environment. They can do all that stuff. But at least we got their attention. This is the whole thing. I mean, people think I'm trying to change the whole world. No, I'm just trying to change the dialogue, get people paying attention, and get them in the voting booth to throw these traitors out of office. That's all I'm trying to do. Wow. And then what happens after that depends on people like you, the people that want to be on the front line of real deep systemic change and wants to eliminate capitalism and replace it with something that works for everybody. That's the next stage. But I'm just trying to get us to the point where that
can happen.
Yeah, because right now none of this is being discussed. What is being discussed? What are the options? Well, let's have war or more war. Or do you want even more war? Those are the 3 choices, ladies.
John, I tell you what, you and I could talk for hours, but I want to stop this now. I think we really understand what you say because I've learned there's an inverse relationship between the length of the podcast and the number of people who are willing to listen to it. And so I want to go ahead. I think what you have said, I mean, what you're saying is so freaking logical, and it just makes so much damn sense. And, and why it's not catching on, I have no idea. That's why I got you on today. I want as many people to hear this as possible. I'm gonna put it on my website. I'm gonna ask Patrice Granville to put it on the Greenville Post, and of course it will get picked up, in a number of other places. So I hear you, Guy. I mean, I read your book, and I was so optimistic, and I read your piece, the fiction book that you wrote about this. And then I read your peace dividend, and every time I get so optimistic, and then they go and they do a false flag, chemical attack in Syria, and everything just seems to just get lost in the white noise of empire. And but it's a wonderful idea. I hope people listen to this. I hope it inspires some people. Not just in the United States. I mean, you've got Emmanuel Macron in France, and I mean, Germany, all over Europe. It's the same thing in Europe. It's nobody. The governments are all neoliberal now. Brussels is neoliberal. everybody's neoliberal. You know, the neocons are in control of the entire Western, democratic system, and Emmanuel Macron is dismantling 50, 75 years of socialism in France by executive order, and he's not even allowing debate to be taking place in the Chamber of Deputies, and even though he has a majority, and people are they're just toothless. I mean, they're protesting and nothing's happening, and he's just dismantling one of the best and most egalitarian systems in the world in terms of Western democracy, because China has its own democracy, and that's a whole nother podcast. And so we won't go there. But so this is not just for Americans, friends and fans out there. This is for everybody, for every citizen in every country, Africa, South America, Asia, that has what they call representative democracy. And I'm not talking about socialist China, Cuba, North Korea, Eritrea, etc. Bolivia, places like that. I'm talking about the West basically, and other parts of the world. So I hope this resonates with as many people as possible and gives them some hope. Because, as you said, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. The money is just, being sucked up in trillions of dollars, to not just the 1%, but the 0.1 and the 0.001%. And so at some point it's going to break and crash. And anyway, you're an amazing guy, John. Every time we communicate by email and stuff, I just love reading your stuff, and you give me hope, and I hope that today's podcast gives everybody that listens hope too.
I'd like to extend an invitation to anybody who's listening. If anybody can find out what the fatal flaw in this is, and just put it to rest, please tell me what it is. I don't want to hear about how bad things are or how bad things have been. Just tell me why this can't possibly work, because I've got a novel to write, and I'd be much happier going upstairs and working on that than trying to push this dead horse up the road, So you said something which I don't understand why, especially people in the peace movement, haven't figured out that this would appeal to a lot of people. I don't know if it would reach a tipping point or not. I don't know. There's no way to know. But if we don't try some new things, if we don't think outside the box, and we don't go out there and try to reach the everyday citizen, nothing is going to change. That's a guarantee. That's an absolute guarantee.
Yeah, exactly. John?
Thank you, sir. This has been fun. I'm sorry I did all the talking.
No. That's why I had you on. I mean, no one wants to listen to me. They want to listen to you.
Oh, come on. Don't be so humble.
That's why I have guests on. I like to listen to them, too. So, well, listen, I'm sure we'll be in touch by email later this week. We always are. And so, and I'm going to take you up on your invitation sometime. My wife and I are going to come visit you and your wife and see your lovely rural setting, and you're always welcome in Shenzhen. We're not that far from each other. So a big Sino hug from China, and I'll let you know when this is up, and we can both blast it around the planet on social media. And I know Patrice at Grandview will definitely put it up too.
All right, peace, my good friend, and
bye-bye.
Keep up the wonderful work.
Thank you, John. Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.